Part 3, Off Spirituality of Saint John Paul II from the beginning of his life. However, life would radically change very soon. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland and soon occupied the entire country. The entire country essentially became a large war camp, in which everyone and everything was strictly controlled. There were shortages of everything. Poles lived in a state of constant want of even the most basic items. People were routinely arrested, shipped off to concentration camps and shot: priests, religious, professors, workers, students, Catholics and Jews. It was a life of continual uncertainty, whether one would sleep in one's own bed that night, whether one would have enough to eat, whether one would be alive the next day. During the occupation, the Nazis required all able-bodied men to have some type of employment or be shipped out to labor camps. So, when they closed down the university, Karol had to find himself a job. He began work at the Zakrzałek quarry on the south side of Krakow, and then, after a year there, was transferred to the nearby Solvay chemical plant in Borek Faleki, where he worked for another 3 years. Up until this time, Karol Wojtyła had lived in the world of academia and the literary arts. But being forced to work with his hands was actually providential, because it introduced him, for the first time in his life, to the world of manual labor and common laborers. For 4 years, Karol lived as one of them, coming to know his fellow blue-collar workers as colleagues and becoming intimately acquainted with their personal lives. In those rough and unsophisticated men he discovered an inherent dignity and spirit of Christian charity. Looking back, he considered it a type of spiritual seminary where he began to think more deeply about the meaning of work itself, seeing it, not so much as a curse of original sin, but rather a participation in God's creativity. From this grew a spirituality of work grounded in the inherent dignity of the worker, which would deeply influence much of his later thought, finding expression in his demand for the rights of workers in communist Poland, as well as in his later magisterial teachings as Pope. Even though Polish cultural activities were banned by the Nazis, Karol secretly began to perform in various small underground theatrical productions. By 1941, he was instrumental in the formation of a new underground theatrical company that would be known as the Rhapsodic Theatre. It would be a theater of the word, a new form of dramatic experiment that would be a protest against the extermination of the Polish nation's culture on its own soil, a form of underground resistance movement against the Nazi occupation. The Rhapsodic Theatre had a Christian subtext, which reflected the New Testament image of the world created through the Word, the Logos, as a means to fight evil by speaking the truth. This theatrical experience would help form him into the charismatic figure who would later be at home on a stage in front of vast crowds of people. But more importantly, it contributed to his spiritual formation by making him a man, who later as Pope John Paul II would relentlessly fight evil by speaking the truth. During the war, the Wojtyłas belonged to St. Stanislaw Kostka parish in the Dubniki district of Krakow, which was staffed by the Salesian Fathers. He would later recall that the Salesian environment of the parish played an important role in his own spiritual formation. As the Gestapo systematically took priests of the parish off to concentration camps, the few, who remained turned to laymen to lead clandestine ministries within the parish. One of these men was Jan Tyranowski, a mystic who would have a decisive influence on Karol's spiritual life. When Tyranowski created a Living Rosary for young men in the parish, he asked Karol Wojtyła to be one of its group leaders. Tyranowski taught his group leaders both the fundamentals of the spiritual life and methods for systematically examining and improving their daily lives. Members of the Living Rosary pledged themselves to a life of intensified prayer as brothers in Christ who would help one another in all the circumstances of their lives. The Living Rosary groups also discussed how Poland might be reconstituted as a Christian society after the war. Thanks for watching. Please share and subscribe for more. Saint John Paul II, pray for we.